Something inside the Cleveland Browns organization is shifting right now, and it's not the kind of story you'll see splashed across headlines or debated loudly on sports shows. It's quieter than that, more subtle, but in many ways far more important. This is the kind of tension that builds behind closed doors, in practice reps that don't get televised, in conversations that never leave the locker room, and in moments so small most people would miss them completely. From the outside, everything looks normal, a team preparing, players competing, coaches evaluating. But underneath that surface, something is changing. You can feel it in the pace of practice, in the way players react to each other, in the energy that lingers just a little longer after a missed throw or a perfectly timed connection. It's not chaos, it's not conflict, but it is pressure, and it's growing. At the center of this quiet storm is Shedeur Sanders, a young quarterback stepping into one of the most difficult situations in professional football. Because this isn't just about learning a playbook or adjusting to the speed of the NFL. It's about walking into a locker room where expectations already exist, where roles are already defined, and where trust isn't given, it's earned, slowly and sometimes painfully. On paper, this might look like a standard competition, the kind every team goes through when evaluating talent. But inside that building, it feels different. Every throw he makes carries weight. Every decision is being watched, not just by coaches with clipboards, but by teammates who are silently deciding whether they believe in him or not. And that kind of evaluation doesn't come with announcements or clear signals. It happens in real time, in instincts, in reactions that can't be faked. What makes this situation even more complicated is that there is already a presence in that locker room, already a quarterback who understands the system, the expectations, and the rhythm of the team. That reality changes everything without anyone having to say a word, because now every single moment from Sanders isn't happening in isolation. It's being measured against something established, something familiar, something trusted. And comparisons like that don't need to be spoken out loud to carry weight. They show up in the smallest details, the timing of a route, the placement of a ball, the way a receiver turns their head expecting something precise, something immediate. When it connects, it builds belief. When it doesn't, even slightly, it creates hesitation. And in a league where everything moves fast, even a fraction of hesitation can feel like a gap that needs to be closed immediately. This is where the real story begins, because what's happening inside the Browns right now has very little to do with highlights or stats and everything to do with trust. Trust is what determines who leads a huddle when things break down. Trust is what keeps a drive alive when the play isn't perfect. Trust is what turns a group of talented individuals into a team that actually believes in the person calling the shots. And right now, that trust is still being formed, still being tested, still being quietly decided in ways most fans will never fully see. It's not about who looks good for a moment, it's about who feels reliable over time. And that process doesn't happen overnight. But what makes the situation even more intense is how quickly everything can change. In the NFL, the gap between uncertainty and belief can close faster than anyone expects. One sequence, one stretch of plays, one moment where everything finally clicks, that's all it takes to shift the entire energy of a locker room. And when that shift begins, it doesn't stay small, it spreads. Teammates start to feel it, confidence starts to build, and suddenly the conversation, without ever being spoken, starts to change. The question is no longer about potential or development, it becomes something much more immediate, much more real. And if that moment is coming for Shedeur Sanders, if that shift is already starting to take shape inside the Browns facility, then what's happening right now isn't just competition anymore. It's the beginning of something that could completely change the direction of the team. The hardest part about stepping into the NFL isn't the playbook, the speed, or even the competition. It's the invisible pressure that comes with trying to prove you belong before anyone fully believes it. For Shedeur Sanders, that pressure doesn't show up in obvious ways. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, and it doesn't come with clear moments you can point to and say, that's where everything went wrong. Instead, it builds quietly, rep after rep, throw after throw, in the spaces between what works and what almost works. Because in this league, almost isn't enough, and everyone on the field knows the difference instantly. What makes it even more intense is how little room there is for adjustment.
In college, talent can carry you through when moments where timing isn't perfect, or decisions take an extra second. In the NFL, those moments get exposed immediately. Windows close faster, defenses react quicker, receivers expect the ball before they even turn their heads. And if that timing is even slightly off, it doesn't just result in an incomplete pass, it creates a ripple effect. A receiver slows down just a fraction, a route loses its sharpness, a look gets exchanged that says more than words ever could. These are the details most people never notice, but inside the locker room, they matter more than anything.
And that's where the real challenge begins. Because Sanders isn't just trying to execute plays, he's trying to earn trust in an environment where trust is everything. Every time he steps into the huddle, there's an unspoken question hanging in the air. Can he deliver exactly what this offense needs? Exactly when it needs it? Not eventually, not after development, right now. And answering that question isn't about one big moment. It's about consistency. It's about showing the same level of control, the same level of awareness over and over again until doubt slowly disappears. But until that happens, the pressure doesn't fade, it builds. You can see it in the smallest moments if you know where to look. A route that's just slightly mistimed, a throw that arrives a split second late, a hesitation at the line that disrupts the rhythm of the entire play. None of these moments are dramatic on their own, but together they create a feeling, a sense that things aren't fully locked in yet. And in a league where precision is expected, that feeling stands out immediately. Not as criticism, not as frustration directed at one person, but as a collective awareness that something still needs to come together. But here's what makes this situation different and what makes it so important. Sanders isn't stepping into a situation where he has time to quietly develop without pressure. He's doing it in a system that demands results, surrounded by players who expect execution, and in a locker room where every rep is being evaluated in real time. That changes the stakes completely, because now every moment isn't just about improvement, it's about proving that improvement is happening fast enough to matter. And the truth is, pressure like this doesn't break players right away. It tests them. It forces them to respond, to adjust, to either shrink under the weight of expectations or lean into it and grow. The NFL has a way of revealing exactly who a player is when things aren't perfect, when timing is off, when the game speeds up and there's no room left to think. That's where real separation happens, not in highlight plays, but in how quickly someone can close the gap between potential and performance. Right now, that's the space Sanders is living in. Not fully proven, not fully doubted, but right in the middle of a process that will decide everything. And the pressure that comes with that isn't something you can measure on a stat sheet or break down in a highlight reel. It's something you feel in every snap, every decision, every moment where the difference between belonging and falling behind is just a fraction of a second. And that's exactly why what happens next matters even more, because the pressure isn't going anywhere, it's only getting heavier. What makes this situation even more difficult isn't just the pressure surrounding Shedeur Sanders, it's the fact that he didn't walk into an empty room. He walked into a system where a standard is already set, where expectations aren't being built from scratch, and where someone else already knows how everything is supposed to look when it's working at a high level. That changes the entire dynamic instantly, because now this isn't just about learning and improving, it's about measuring up to something that already exists. That standard is Deshaun Watson, and whether anyone says it out loud or not, his presence carries weight inside the Cleveland Browns facility. Experience shows up in ways that don't always translate to highlight plays. It's in the rhythm of a drive, the confidence at the line of scrimmage, the way adjustments are made without hesitation. It's knowing exactly where a receiver is going to be before the break even happens. It's understanding how to recover when a play breaks down, instead of forcing something that isn't there. These are the details that separate someone who's still learning from someone who already understands how to operate within the system. And the reality is, teammates notice that immediately. Not because they're choosing sides or comparing personalities, but because performance naturally creates a reference point.
When one quarterback delivers the ball on time, consistently with control, it sets an expectation for what right looks like. And once that expectation is established, anything that falls short, even slightly, becomes more visible. It's not about criticism, it's about contrast, the difference between a play that feels smooth and a play that feels just a step off. And in the NFL, those small differences stand out more than anything else. This is where things get uncomfortable, because Sanders isn't just trying to prove he can succeed, he's doing it while being compared to someone who already has a level of trust within the locker room. Trust that wasn't built overnight, trust that came from repetition, consistency, and time spent proving reliability. And that's the hardest gap to close, because you can't fast forward trust, you can't demand it, you can only earn it one moment at a time, until teammates start to feel it instead of question it. What makes it even more intense is how subtle this comparison really is. No one is standing in the locker room making declarations, no one is openly saying who they believe in more, but you can see it in reactions. The way a receiver runs a route with full confidence, expecting the ball exactly where it needs to be. The way a huddle responds to a call, fully locked in without hesitation. The way momentum builds when things feel under control. These are signals, quiet but powerful, that reveal where trust already exists and where it's still being formed. And for Sanders, every single rep is happening in the shadow of that reality. Every throw isn't just judged on whether it works, it's judged on how it compares. Is it sharp? Is quick? Is confident? Does it feel the same to the players around him? Because in a system where the standard is already known, good enough doesn't always feel good enough. It has to match or eventually exceed what's already been established. That's what makes this phase so critical, because this isn't just about development anymore. It's about closing a gap that everyone can feel, even if no one's openly talking about it. And the moment that gap starts to shrink, even slightly, it changes everything. It shifts how teammates respond. It shifts how confidence builds. It shifts how the entire offense begins to function. But until that shift becomes undeniable, the comparison doesn't go away. It stays there, quietly influencing everything. And that's exactly what makes what comes next so important. This is where the situation becomes even more complicated, because talent alone isn't what determines success at this level. Connection does. And right now, that connection is still being built, especially between Shedeur Sanders and a receiver like Jerry Jeudy, who operates with a completely different level of expectation. At this stage of the NFL, wide receivers aren't just running routes, they're anticipating precision. They expect the ball to arrive at an exact spot, at an exact moment, without hesitation. Not close, not almost, exact. And when that level of synchronization isn't fully there yet, it doesn't need to be pointed out, it shows up on its own.
You can see it in the smallest details if you pay attention. A route develops cleanly, the separation is there, but the ball arrives just a fraction too late, or it's slightly behind, forcing the receiver to adjust instead of continuing in stride. These aren't dramatic mistakes, but they disrupt rhythm. And in an offense that depends on timing, rhythm is everything. When it's there, everything flows, plays feel effortless, drives build naturally, confidence spreads. But when it's even slightly off, the entire sequence feels heavier. There's a pause where there shouldn't be one, a reset where momentum should have continued, and those moments start to add up. For a receiver like Jeudy, that difference is impossible to ignore. Players at that level are used to operating within a system where timing is second nature, where they don't have to think about whether the ball will be there, it just is. So when that connection isn't fully established yet, the reaction isn't explosive or confrontational, it's quieter than that. A glance after a play, a subtle shift in body language, a moment where the energy lingers just a little longer than it should. It's not frustration directed at a person, it's frustration with the break in rhythm, with the feeling that something didn't click the way it was supposed to. And that's what makes chemistry so difficult to build, because it's not just about repetition, it's about understanding. Understanding how a receiver moves, how they accelerate, how they expect the ball depending on coverage, leverage, and timing. It's about throwing before the break, not after it. It's about trusting that the route will be exactly where it needs to be without needing to confirm it. And until that level of trust is fully developed, there's always going to be a slight disconnect, even if everything else looks technically correct. The challenge for Sanders is that this process doesn't come with extra time or patience. He's building chemistry in an environment where expectations are already high, where receivers aren't adjusting to him, he has to adjust to them. And that shifts the pressure entirely, because now every missed connection feels bigger than it actually is, not because it's a major mistake, but because it interrupts something that's supposed to feel automatic. And when something that should be automatic isn't, it stands out immediately. But what makes this moment so important is that chemistry, once it starts to click, changes everything faster than people expect. One clean connection leads to another. Timing sharpens, confidence grows, and suddenly those small moments of hesitation disappear. The same routes that felt slightly off begin to feel natural. The same throws that required adjustment start arriving exactly where they should. And when that happens, the entire offense begins to move differently, not because of a major change, but because the details finally align. Right now, that alignment is still forming. It's not broken, it's not failing, it's just not complete yet. And in the NFL, that space between almost and fully connected is where the biggest differences are felt. Because once that gap closes, even slightly, it doesn't just improve performance, it changes perception. And that's when everything starts to shift. What makes this entire situation so important isn't just the pressure or the gaps that still exist, it's how Shedeur Sanders is responding to it. Because this is usually the point where things go one of two ways. Players either start to hesitate, pulling back just enough to avoid mistakes, or they lean into the pressure and force themselves to grow faster than the situation demands. And right now, Sanders is choosing the harder path. Instead of shrinking when the timing isn't perfect or when a connection breaks down, he's doing the opposite. He's staying engaged after every rep, talking with receivers, going over details, trying to understand exactly what went wrong and how to fix it immediately. That might not sound dramatic from the outside, but inside an NFL environment, that response stands out because it shows something teammates pay attention to very quickly, not just ability, but intent. The willingness to keep showing up, to keep throwing, to keep adjusting even when things aren't clicking yet. That's where respect starts to build, long before full trust is established. You can see it in how the moments are starting to change. The hesitation that was there early on isn't as visible now. Decisions are coming a little faster, throws are leaving his hand with more conviction. Routes that once felt slightly off are beginning to sync up just enough to notice the difference. It's not perfect and it's not consistent every single time, but it's moving in the direction that matters. And in a locker room full of players who understand how hard that adjustment really is, progress like that doesn't go unnoticed. What's happening here is subtle, but it's powerful, because when a quarterback shows that he's willing to take ownership, not just of success, but of every small mistake, it changes how people respond to him. Receivers start to give a little more energy on routes. Conversations become more open, more detailed. The tone shifts from silent evaluation to quiet collaboration. And that shift is where real chemistry begins to form, not just through execution, but through mutual understanding. At the same time, this response is doing something even more important. It's slowly changing the narrative around him inside the Cleveland Browns building. Early on, the focus might have been on what wasn't fully there yet, the timing, the rhythm, the adjustment to NFL speed. But now the focus is starting to include something else, how quickly those things are improving. And that matters, because in a competitive environment, growth isn't judged by where you start, it's judged by how fast you close the gap. This is the turning point, because once teammates begin to see consistent effort turn into visible improvement, belief starts to follow. Not all at once, not in a way that gets announced, but in small moments, a receiver trusting the timing just a little more, a play unfolding with less hesitation, a drive that feels smoother than it did before. These are the signs that something is changing, even if it hasn't fully arrived yet. And that's what makes this phase so critical. Because Sanders isn't just trying to prove that he can play, he's proving that he can adapt under pressure, that he can take feedback and turn it into results, that he can handle the weight of expectations without letting him slow down. Those are the traits that separate players who stay in the conversation from players who take control of it.
Right now, that control isn't fully his yet, but for the first time, it's starting to feel like it could be. And once that possibility becomes real inside a locker room, everything begins to shift. What most people don't realize is that the real decision-making process inside an NFL team doesn't start with coaches, it starts with the players. Long before anything becomes official, long before depth charts are finalized or announcements are made, there's a silent evaluation happening every single day inside the locker room of the Cleveland Browns. It's not written down, it's not discussed openly, but it's constant. Every rep, every throw, every reaction is being observed, processed, and quietly judged by the people who matter most, the teammates who have to trust whoever lines up under center.
For Shedeur Sanders, this is where the pressure takes on a completely different meaning. Because now, it's not just about improving mechanics or understanding the playbook, it's about how he's perceived in moments that don't show up on film. How does he respond when a play breaks down? How does he carry himself after a mistake? Does he reset quickly, or does hesitation linger into the next snap? These are the details that players pick up on instantly, and once they form an opinion, it's not easy to change. What makes this evaluation so intense is how subtle it is. No one is standing in the huddle announcing who they believe in. No one is openly questioning decisions. But you can feel it in the rhythm of the offense. You can see it in how quickly players line up, how confidently routes are run, how naturally everything flows when there's belief in the person leading it. And when that belief isn't fully there yet, it shows up just as clearly, not through mistakes, but through hesitation, a slight delay, a fraction of uncertainty, small moments that reveal everything without saying a word. At the same time, this kind of evaluation doesn't only focus on performance, it focuses on presence. Teammates are constantly asking themselves, even if they don't realize it, is this someone I trust when things aren't perfect? Because in the NFL, things are rarely perfect. Plays break down, defenses adjust, pressure builds, and in those moments, the quarterback isn't just executing, they're leading, they're stabilizing everything around them. And if that presence isn't felt, it becomes noticeable very quickly. There's also been quiet speculation surrounding how intense this internal competition really is. Some reports and conversations around the team suggest that the battle isn't just about skill, it's about positioning, timing, and who can take control of the locker room energy first. Nothing confirmed, nothing official, but enough buzz to make people pay attention. Because when that kind of speculation starts to circulate, it usually means something real is happening beneath the surface. And that's what makes every single practice feel different right now. It's no longer just preparation, it's an audition that never really stops. Every throw is a statement, every completed drive builds momentum, every mistake creates a moment that has to be answered immediately. And through it all, the locker room is watching, constantly adjusting its perception based on what it sees in real time. For Sanders, this means one thing. There's no neutral ground. He's either building belief or leaving space for doubt. There's no pause, no reset where everything starts fresh. Each day carries over into the next, each rep adding to a larger picture that's slowly becoming clearer to everyone involved. And what's starting to happen now is that this silent evaluation is no longer just about questioning whether he belongs. It's beginning to shift towards something much more important, whether he's ready to take control. At some point in every competition, there's a moment where things stop feeling uncertain and start feeling real. Not because someone announces it, not because there's a clear turning point everyone can point to, but because the energy begins to change in a way that's impossible to ignore. And inside the Cleveland Browns right now, that shift is starting to take shape. It's not dramatic, it's not overwhelming, but it's there, in the rhythm of practice, in the speed of execution, in the way plays are beginning to come together instead of falling just short. For Sanders, the difference is showing up in the details. The reads are coming quicker now, not rushed, but decisive. The ball is leaving his hand with more confidence, arriving where it needs to be instead of where it might be.
Routes that once felt slightly out of sync are beginning to connect more naturally, especially with players like Jerry Jeudy, where timing is everything. These aren't highlight moments, they're something more important. They're consistent, and consistency is what changes how a locker room feels about a quarterback. You can see it in how teammates are responding. There's less hesitation in their movement, more trust in the flow of each play. Receivers are running routes with the expectation that the ball will be there, not adjusting mid-play to compensate for uncertainty. The offense starts to feel smoother, more controlled, like it's operating on rhythm instead of effort. And when that kind of rhythm starts to build, it doesn't stay contained, it spreads. Confidence becomes shared, energy becomes aligned, and suddenly the entire unit begins to function at a higher level without needing anything dramatic to trigger it. What makes this shift even more significant is how it's affecting the comparison that has been quietly present all along. Deshaun Watson is still there, still experienced, still operating with a level of comfort that only comes from time in the system. That hasn't changed, but what has changed is the gap. It's no longer as wide, no longer as obvious. The difference between the two isn't disappearing completely, but it's shrinking enough to be noticed. And in a competitive environment, that's when things become unpredictable. Because once the gap gets small enough, every single rep starts to matter even more. Every successful drive feels like momentum. Every clean sequence adds pressure to the existing hierarchy. And that's when the dynamic inside a locker room can shift faster than anyone expects. Players don't just respond to what has been, they respond to what's happening right now. And what's happening right now shows progress, control, and confidence. Belief starts to follow. There's also something else happening beneath the surface. The way Sanders carries himself is beginning to match the improvement in his play. The huddle feels more settled, communication is sharper, reactions after plays, good or bad, are quicker, more controlled, more aligned with someone who understands what's required at this level. And that presence matters just as much as execution, because quarterbacks aren't just evaluated on what they do, they're evaluated on how they make everyone else feel when they're leading. This is the phase where things get dangerous, not in a negative sense, but in a way that changes outcomes. Because now the conversation is no longer about potential catching up to reality, it's about whether reality is starting to shift. And when that question becomes real inside an NFL locker room, it creates a kind of pressure that doesn't just sit on one player, it spreads across the entire competition. Right now, momentum is no longer one-sided, it's moving. And once momentum starts to move like that, it rarely stops without forcing a decision. Now, everything starts to narrow down to a single question, and it's a question nobody inside the Cleveland Browns is saying out loud, but everyone is thinking. Because this is no longer about flashes of potential or steady improvement. That phase is over. What's happening now is more direct, more immediate, and far more difficult to ignore. The conversation has quietly shifted from, can he develop, to something much heavier. Can Shedeur Sanders actually take control of this offense when it matters most?
And that question changes everything, because control in the NFL isn't about making the right throw when everything goes according to plan. It's about what happens when nothing goes according to plan. When protection breaks down, when routes get disrupted, when the defense shows something unexpected at the line. Those are the moments that define a quarterback. Not the clean plays, not the scripted sequences, but the chaos. That's where leadership becomes visible. That's where teammates decide without hesitation whether they believe in the person calling the shots. You can start to see those moments appearing more often now. Situations where the play isn't perfect, where the timing isn't ideal, where something forces a quick adjustment, and instead of hesitation, there's a response. Faster decisions, cleaner reactions, a sense that the game is slowing down just enough for him to stay in control instead of chasing it. It's not flawless, and it's not happening every single time, but it's happening enough to raise a new possibility. And in a competitive environment, possibility is dangerous, because once it becomes visible, it starts to change how everyone evaluates what they're seeing. At the same time, the presence of Deshaun Watson hasn't faded. If anything, it's become more significant, because now the comparison isn't distant, it's close. The difference between experience and emergence is tightening, and that creates a different kind of pressure, not just on Sanders, but on the entire situation. Because when two options start to feel viable, every small detail becomes amplified. Every drive, every decision, every moment of composure carries more weight than it did before. And this is where the locker room plays its biggest role. Players don't just follow talent, they follow stability. They follow someone who feels reliable when things aren't perfect, someone who can steady everything when the energy starts to shift. And that kind of belief doesn't come from highlights. It comes from repeated moments where nothing breaks, even when everything around it tries to. Right now, that belief is still forming, still being tested, but it's no longer out of reach. What makes this moment so critical is that the answer to this question won't come from one big play or one standout performance. It will come from accumulation, from enough reps, enough drives, enough situations where the same pattern keeps showing up: control, composure, confidence. And once that pattern becomes undeniable, the decision starts to make itself, long before anyone officially confirms it. Because at this stage, it's not about who has the higher ceiling or the better potential, it's about who the team trusts when everything is on the line. And right now, that answer is getting closer than anyone expected. And this is where everything comes full circle, because what's happening inside the Cleveland Browns right now isn't just a position battle. It's a decision that's already starting to take shape long before it becomes official. From the outside, it will eventually look simple: a name on a depth chart, a starter announced, a direction chosen. But inside that locker room, the real decision has been forming for weeks, built on moments that never make headlines and reactions that never get explained. For Shedeur Sanders, this journey was never just about proving he could play at this level. It was about something far more difficult: proving that he could be relied on when everything isn't perfect. And slowly, rep by rep, that perception has started to change. Not completely, not in a way that erases every doubt, but enough to shift the conversation. Enough to look twice. Enough to turn what once felt like a long-term possibility into something that feels much more immediate. At the same time, Deshaun Watson remains exactly what he's always been: a standard, a reference point, a reminder of what control and experience look like when they're fully established. That hasn't disappeared, and it won't disappear easily. But what has changed is the distance between expectation and reality. It's no longer a gap that feels impossible to close. It's a space that's actively shrinking, shaped by performance, by response, and by how quickly things are starting to come together. And that's what makes this moment so important, because decisions like this aren't made in a single day. They're built through accumulation, through trust that grows quietly, through confidence that spreads without needing to be announced, through a locker room that gradually begins to align around what feels most stable, most reliable, most real. Coaches may be the ones who finalize the call, but they're not the only ones influencing it. By the time anything becomes official, the tone inside the team is already set. So now, everything is pointing toward a moment that feels inevitable. The moment where the competition ends and a direction is chosen. The moment where uncertainty disappears and clarity takes its place. But what makes it interesting is that in many ways, that moment might not change as much as people expect. Because if the locker room has already begun to believe, if trust has already begun to settle in, then the decision won't feel like a surprise. It will feel like confirmation. And this leaves one final question hanging in the air. One that goes beyond this competition, beyond this offseason, and maybe even beyond this season entirely. If this shift is real, if this belief continues to grow, then this isn't just about who starts, it's about who takes control of the future.